Welcome to our virtual fireside storytelling event of Fox and Raven Bones. Today we have a very special story, which is called Spirit Father. Spirit Father. And this story is a way of honoring the fathers. It is Father's Day. We want to honor all the fathers, and we also want to celebrate the solstice. And interesting enough, there is a reason why Father's Day typically falls right on or just about the solstice. And through this story, we're going to see how these are woven together and how we may honor both of those in a good way. So here we are with story. And it is said that whenever a story is told and the telling is with a certain kind of way and with a particular kind of intention, that it becomes night and a fire becomes kindled. The trees lean in a little closer, listening into the story and conversations. The white moon seems to pause her journey across that starry sky, and even the mountain rivers fall quiet to listen in. Storytelling has long been how we enter a certain kind of mind that allows our hearts to speak to us. It's long been a way for the great mythic symbology and patterns present in our lives to come close in and reveal themselves so we may walk into this day with a little more clarity, with a little more strength and inspired vision. So today on Father's Day and the solstice, we join in these bardic ways of gathering around the virtual storytelling fire. And we're about to dive into the story of Spirit Father. And afterwards, we're going to do this reflective dialogue to draw out the mythic symbology present in the imageries of this story, because there's a beautiful textured layers to unpack in this story. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. Let me just get a sip here. So this is the story of Spirit Father, the story of the secret songlines of Father. There is a man who lives just before the edge of an ancient primal forest. He lives just before the edge of an ancient primal forest. He lives in the meadow where he tills the land amongst other plots of land that are part of the village. In his cottage lives his wife and children. And each day, the man wakes early, straps on his soiled boots, and dons his old, weathered coat. He kisses the foreheads of his sleeping children and wife, then opens the wooden door and walks onto his creaky porch. From there, he can hear the hooting of owls, hoo-hoo, and the wild bugle of elk, somewhere just beyond the edge of the forest, hinting of something deep within its interior. And from there, a voice he can hear, speaking from those deep shadows to come into the shadows, come into the wildness. He hears that voice. But he turns his head away from the voice, turns his head to the sky, where there would be just a sliver of light on the horizon. And he'd look up to that sky and he would give thanks to the spirits who are. Give thanks for his wife and children and pray for them to be safe while he is away. Now, unbeknownst to him, his children would often wake and tiptoe ever so quietly over to the paned window, and they would watch as he spoke those beautiful words of poetry and song. They could never quite hear the words, but they could feel the beauty and the reverence in them. To those children's eyes, it was their father's words that made the sun come up. To those children, it was their father's words that made the sun come up. The father would then walk over to the woodshed, just behind the woodshed, and he would pick up a coarse burlap potato sack-like bag, and he would sling it over his shoulder. The weight of the bag would have the man's feet sink down into the earth. And as he walked onto the path that took him over the hill away from the cottage, the children could see him slump over by its weight. And they would wonder, I wonder what is in that bag. Now it was once that he was just beyond the hill, just out of sight, that he would get to work. He'd pull out his heavy axe and he would begin methodically, rhythmically swinging it into the hard crust of the earth. Each day with sweat and toil, he'd have to break open that crusty surface again and again and again, day after day. And he would dig down, down, down to where it became this rich, dark earthen soil. And there in that dark earthen soil, he would find the seeds he planted. And sometimes he would plant new ones, depending on the season. He'd water them, but not just with the water, the heavy buckets he carried from that distant well. No, he would also water them with his prayers, with the dreamings that he had for his children. He knew, in the way that fathers know, that water by itself wouldn't be enough. These seeds required tears born from the perspiration of the heart's prayers. These seeds required the tears born from the perspiration of the heart's prayers. Now, while he tended to that crusty surface of the soil day after day, all the while that voice within that ancient primal force would speak out from those emerald shadows. Come into the folds of the emerald shadows. Come into wildness. And every so often, the Father might answer. He'd follow the elk trail through that thick foliage of ferns and cedars and devil club. And each step he took would be an offering of himself, a sense of surrendering and coming close within. Sometimes he would even break out that feral wild energy and begin to crawl on hands and knees and even snarl. Other times he would shapeshift into bear or raven. He would move through that wild landscape, sensing into the wild as the wild forest sensed into him. And the old elk path, it would lead him up to the top of the distant mountain. He would stand upon a granite edge and again speak those words of prayer and poetry to the sky. The sun would emerge and the mountain peak would become uncloaked. Father's sun would shine those radiant beams down on the Father, and he would feel restored, feel a sense of wildness, a sense of connection, and he would remember who he is. Then he would take the long trek back and return back to the land. He'd pick up his axe and begin to toil back again, but with renewed strength, renewed inspiration, remembering of who he is. Now he picked this place of toiling on the land because it gave him an advantage point to see the shadowy wolves that would try to breach the safety of their humble home. He would take out his battle axe and he would slay them, chopping off their heads one by one. And each time those heads seemed to grow back onto those wolves. And again, he would move his warrior's axe and slay them. And oftentimes, the father would actually be thrown down, and those gnarly teeth would slash with a nearly deathly blow. But each time, he would look up to the Son, Father's Son, send up those prayers, those dreamings for his children. And the sun would send its rays, those golden, warm rays, down into the heart of the Father, and he would rise up and battle again, and ensure that the home front was safe again. His children and his wife never knew of these battles, never knew of the scars beneath his shirt and his cloaks. He did not want them to fear. So he gathered the heads, rolled onto the ground, and would place them in his burlap bag and keep them safe until the next day. Despite this, and all that the man did, all that Father does, he never quite felt like he was able to do enough. He could never quite plant all the seeds he wanted to plant. He could never quite get all the seeds he planted to fully grow. And he worried for his children. He worried that the stories that he would pass down to his son and the songlines he would pass down to his daughter may not have that caribou dust in them to take root or be enough medicine to get them through. He didn't know what else he could do. And he felt trapped because this is what he does. This is how he provides for his family. This is how he labored to chop the wood for their hearth, for the warmth of their fire. This is how he put meat on the table. This is how he knew to toil each day on the land with the hopes the fruits of his labor would be just enough. Now, of all the stories in the village, the stories always seem to project onto the fathers that, they should have it all figured out, that they should know what to do. But the truth is, the father didn't have it all figured out. He didn't always know what to do. And so he felt isolated and alone as he navigated this interior of tending to his family. But each day, the father would return to toil that land. Each day he would fend off those wolves. Each day he would tend to the seeds he planted with the water of his prayers. And when he would return home at night, before going up and entering into his cottage and abode, he would go to the old woodshed. He would unstrap the bag of wolf heads and place them behind the woodshed. He would stand there as the sun set over the horizon, and once again he would sing his prayers to the sun, giving thanks for the day and hope that his efforts were enough. Again, unbeknownst to him, his children would often watch him return, and they'd watch as he spoke to the sun beautiful words of poetry and reverence. To them, it was their father's words that lowered the sun over the horizon. He would make a small fire, and into those dancing flames he'd give offerings and ask for the spirits who are to take his weight for the evening, that he can enter into his abode with an open heart for his wife and his children. And he would promise that he'll take that bag and sling it back over his shoulder once again in the pre-dawn morning when his family slept. And again, the next day, he would toil on for the dreams of his children. And that is the story of Spirit Father. Home. So there's a lot to unpack in that story. A lot of incredible imagery right there. So we're going to dive into now how to really unpack the story, how to really feel into the symbology and imagery in the story, and what does that really represent for our fathers? What is the path that our fathers are traveling, unbeknownst to all of us? And how can we begin to honor them and celebrate them? So let's take a look. So we begin the story with a man who lives just before the edge of the forest. Just before the edge of the forest. He doesn't live inside the forest. He doesn't live in the middle of town, the village. He lives just at the edge. See, the forest edge has long been the symbol of both wildness as well as that knowledge we seek, which we will only find just beyond the thresholds of what is known to us. And we have to go beyond our edges and out into the deep interiors beyond our threshold, where we have a kind of an experience that awakens the knowledge that we seek. And for men specifically, there is this innate need to touch that sense of wildness within them. And by wildness, what we mean is that ancient call of connecting with that authentic nature of who we are. And we call this our bone medicine or our bone memory. It's in our bones. And we have a need for adventure that reconnects us with our bone memory. This is a very important aspect to the fathers in the world. So the man lives just before the wild forest, and we can see how each morning he opens that wooden door, steps out onto that creaky porch, and he hears the hooting of owl and that primal bugle of the elk. And both of these reflect that he has this connection with that old feral language of wildness. He has this connection to that old feral language. He hears the language, he hears the owl, he hears the elk. He feels it inside of him. It reflects a connection to what's there within the forest. And from within that interior, he hears a voice, "Come, return to me." But he doesn't answer. Instead, he turns his head away and he speaks up to the sky spirits. Now, here we may feel into how the man may have a sense of belonging to that undomesticated interior of the wildness. And yet, he also has a sense of belonging to the family hearth that feeds him in other ways. So he belongs to two worlds. And he has chosen the domesticated world to make a home in. That's a very important thing. He has chosen the domesticated world to make a home in. Right? Men have a sense of duty. They have this natural sense of duty, and they will sacrifice that other wild calling so they can do what must be done. But that calling is always there, trembling just beneath the surface of their being. It isn't that they don't cherish family life, they cherish it greatly. So much so that they remain here in the home, not in the wild. But what this is, it's merely a reflection that the other world is also woven within the father's interior. And so it's recognizing that the father has this sense of belonging to the two worlds. Right? Now, not all men can walk this path on the edge. Right? That trembling beneath that surface, it grows louder and louder into this deafening roar. Right? And some are successful at pushing it down, if we're to call pushing it down a success. Right? We might not call that success, but some are able to push it down, while others can no longer deny that call, and they must go. They must answer that call. And just as there's a sense of duty to tending to the responsibilities, there's also a sense of duty to answering the call. It's within our bone memory. So each man uniquely walks this line between duties of the call, and duties of the home. But what is most common about it is there's this sense of having to walk this line alone and to walk it in silence. Because to the Father, no one else seems to quite understand it. And so he keeps its reasoning to himself. See, there's this need to be feral, to be undomesticated to a certain extent, because too much domestication can kill the man. And this is where we see many midlife crises in men, because they didn't create that balance, the bridge between the wild world and the domesticated. And that is really the secret to that sacred masculinity. Now, when we come back to the home and into the story, we see that before he leaves, right, he kisses the foreheads of his children, his wife. Right? So we see in this story, the man has chosen the duty of the family over the call. Here we have a father walking the line between the two worlds, a way of bridging them. Right? And so we see when he's at home, before he leaves, he kisses the foreheads of his children and wife. Now, whether a father is actually in the home or whether he's out of the home, right? Whether there's been divorce or the family is there together, right? Each morning a father wakes. Each time a father wakes, his heart reaches across space to his children and to those who he loves. And these here are his songlines. These are his songlines. And very often these songlines are sung through these unspoken prayers. They're unspoken prayers that are expressed through the deep sense of feeling that he has for his children. But they're spoken one way or another, and they travel across space and time. That is a father's songlines. And here, as he's out there looking up into the sky and giving his prayers, we get that sense of the kind of magic that fathers hold for their children. When these children see him speak beautiful words of poetry and prayer to the sky, and they witness that sun come up by their father's words, there's a magic that takes hold in those children's eyes and their children's hearts. And when they see this again, when he speaks his prayers at the end of the day and see his words put the sun to rest, they see that his father is of the sun. And that is part of their bone memory. So to his children, fathers in general, they have a hidden knowledge. See, they know things, secret things that connect us to our bone memory, to that wild bone memory. And we can also feel they carry a weight with this hidden knowledge. You can see how they carry a weight with this hidden knowledge. And it seems that no matter what age we become, we can see how a father holds a secret magic and mystery within his story. It's as if we will never quite know what our fathers know. It remains part of the mystery of our life that gives our own life a sense of meaning and keeps us seeking to know these secrets of life. Now in the story, it's when he is just over the hill and out of sight that he gets to work. But why must he be out of sight? Why must he be out of sight? What this reflects on is how much the Father does that goes unseen and unknown to support and love the family. It isn't that he's going out of sight and he's hiding his work. It's just that so much of the work that he does to tend to his family never gets acknowledged, seen, or even known. Right? And he pulls out his heavy axe to break open that crust of the earth. Now, the axe in mythology is often connected to the sun god, the father sun. Right? It's linked to the ancient sun and the thunder beings and reflects the power of the Father to take control of the storms. Reflects the Father's power to take control of the storms. And what we see here is the Father with the axe. The axe is that primal force that connects us to those primal elemental energies. And so there's that part of that wildness there with the axe. But what he's doing, he's taking that axe and he's using the axe to bring it in to serve the domesticated world that he lives in, to tend to his family, to tend to his love, to tend to life. So he is harnessing and taming those wild elements to tend to life. And we see here how the Father must break through that hard crust of the earth again and again and again, day after day. And day after day, he returns. And this again speaks to the Father's discipline to tend to what must be tended to, and how it requires this continued effort to do so. There's never the time of resting. There's always the time of tending to. We also see here that the seeds he's planting and the seeds that he's tending to, they require more than well water, right? They are infused with the waters of his prayers, with the waters of his dreamings for his children. In other words, he's never not thinking of his children, that his efforts are for them. So he continues to show up, continues to tend to the soil, break through that crust day after day. But then we come to that point in the story where the forest, that voice in the forest actually speaks, and he actually answers the call coming from within the interior of the forest. And he allows his wildness to come forward. And he moves there into the brush. He finds the trail of the elk and he trails the elk. Now, why the elk? See, the elk has long been a symbol for a sense of nobility of soul. Now, the antlers of elk and deer have long been regarded as like the rays of the sun itself. So here we see how he's reconnecting with his bone memory and that nobility of soul. He's reconnecting with that nobility of soul. This is an important thing because as men and fathers move in the world, and they tend to what must be done, they're often working in unfulfilling jobs. They're doing things where they often feel trapped in, and in that sense of nobility can begin to diminish. That sense of honor and integrity, that sense of that wild energy of who they truly are, that nobility becomes muted as we begin to compromise and do simply what must be done. So here we see him trailing his nobility of soul back into the wildness of his being, back to his bone memory. He's trailing his nobility of soul back to his bone memory. And that's, of course, that's going to be unique for each man. But that is what he's doing. And he opens up, he breaks free from that domestication feeling where he shape shifts into other animals and allow himself to be undomesticated, to be wild, and to remember and speak the old feral language of that wild interior. Mm. And he follows that path, and that path makes him perspire, sweat, helps him come back into his strength and be reacquainted with himself, reacquainted with his own inner nature, with his unique bone medicine. And the sun comes out, brings those golden warm rays, and warms him. Now, here's the importance of the sun and the solstice. Right? The sun has long been the symbol for fathers across the world and through the ages. The sun also represents a sense of nobility, represents a sense of warmth, strength, nourishment, as well as duty, right? That dutiful ways of the sun that makes its way across the sky each day. And in some traditions, it's said that the sun travels through the underworld when it's not in the sky, doing that inner work necessary of slaying the demons and the shadows so that life may continue above, but no one's the wiser for it. No one really knows of all these other duties the sun does for the other people. That's his silent sacrifice. And so we see here the Father connecting with Father Son and coming back into the nobility of self and remembering the bone memory. He is not out there learning, he's out there remembering who he is and the strengths and gifts he has to contribute. And we see these same attributes with fathers, right? The hidden and secret work that they do that is never really known to others. There's that sense of duty to show up and get done what's needed done. And they keep the minds of others safe from their tribulations, even as they work on their behalf. So as of the telling of the stories, this is told on the summer solstice. And what an amazing, significant time that Father's Day coincides with the day we celebrate Father's Son on the summer solstice, the time of honoring the sacred masculine, the time of honoring the nobility, a soul within us that will hopefully reconnect each of us with our own bone memory, with that sense that we all are a part of this wild, living earth. So what we can see here is the importance of men going out and rewilding themselves from time to time and to reconnect with their bone medicine, to reconnect with their bone memory of who they are. Men need to tend to their inner nature. They need to touch upon their undomesticated sense of self and tap into their feral spirits. And if they do this on a regular basis, they will have more to give to their families, more to contribute to the world because they'll be resting in that nobility of self. And what's very significant here in this story, it's very important to acknowledge, is that the father, he went into the forest, he answered the call, but he didn't get lost there. He returned. He came back. And I think many men fear that if they answer that call, that it's all or nothing. They fear they will get lost in wildness and not return. That the women in their lives fear that if they help tend to the men in their lives tend to that wildness and nurture it, that they won't return. But the opposite is true because the man, the father, lives in both worlds. And he needs the water and the soil of both worlds to be alive. So in this story, he came back and he had more strength and more power because of the tending of the wildness within him. And when the man actually does arrive back to the field, we learn how he is not only tending to the soil, he's also fighting off the wolves. Right? He cuts their heads off, but they grow back. And sometimes he gets thrown to the ground and their teeth cut deep into him where he might not even live. But he channels Father's Son. He rises up and decapitates those wolves again. He puts their heads in his burlap bag so that they won't grow back again. And so that for the evening, they will be safe. Now, it's interesting how, in today's society is always projecting the story onto men, especially in their middle ages and so forth, that, men are supposed to have it all figured out, that they should have it all together by now, right? That they should know what to do. And if not, they need to man up, as the saying goes. And so we're in a society of this very unhealthy masculinity that keeps men feeling isolated and alone, and they're trying to navigate their struggles alone. So they don't have that safety to really share the true story of what they're navigating. But despite this pressure, despite this image that they're trying to uphold, to do their best for, despite all this, and despite how much to do, right? They often feel like they're not enough. They feel that they're failing their children and partners. Many are working those unfulfilling jobs, and they feel trapped. But nonetheless, despite all of this, and this is the strength and the magic of the Father, each day that Father would return to toil to the land, fend off the wolves, and tend to the seeds he planted with the waters of his prayers, the dreamings for his children. Just like how the sun each morning breaks open into the day and travels dutifully across the sky, we see that this here is the duty and the strength and the love of the Father. We can see how a father's love is often a silent devotion. Like how we only see the tip of an iceberg while the rest is deep beneath the surface. That is a father's love. That is a father's love. So today we give thanks on this Father's Day. We give thanks for all you fathers in the world. We give thanks for all you do that goes unseen and unknown. For all the silent songlines and prayers deeply felt. We give thanks for tending to your wild nature and your bone memory and holding that special kind of magic where your words bring the sun into the day. Fathers, happy Father's Day. We see you. We love you. We honor you. Thank you for your life, your light, your warmth, the radiance of your sun that you are. Home. So that is today's storytelling event with a fox and raven's bones. And I would love to hear your feedback on this story. What really got stirred up for you? What came to the surface of your own being? What memories were stirred within you? What bone memories might have been awoken? And if you feel like you'd like to share, please email me, Chivito, at learning@treeoftotems.com. learning@treeoftotems.com. You can always visit me through our website at treeoftotems.com. Well, with that, everyone, I want to wish everyone a happy Father's Day and a happy solstice. Oh, so much to celebrate. So many beautiful souls to be grateful for. All right, with that, I am Chi Vito Koa with Tree of Totems, and Until next time.